Hello, this is Jerusha Lindsay presenting Dialect Atlas. In this presentation, we're going to look forward into what is dialect mapping, the uses, how the data is procured, and all such aspects. For first, what is a dialect? Dialect, it's a variety of a language that signals where a person comes from. The word dialect comes from an ancient Greek word dialectos, which means discourse, language, or dialect, which is derived from dialegus thai, to discourse or to talk. A dialect is chiefly distinguished from other dialects of the same language by features of linguistic structure. A dialect is basically the same language, but the features of linguistic structure are different. The grammar might be different, the morphological aspects, the syntactical aspects, and all such grammatical major vocabulary and pronunciation things might be different. Dialectology is the study of dialects, the study of variations and the result of geographical and social isolation of different vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation, which also includes accent and many other aspects. Dialectology as a discipline began in the 19th century with the development in Western Europe of dictionaries and grammars of regional dialects. So these works started developing in the late 1920s as researchers or linguists explored more into the subjects of dialects, languages, and the varied pronunciations of how people speak according to morphology, the syntactical formations, and all the other grammatical aspects. Nevertheless, while dialects are of the same language, they still possess a common core feature of the root language, but they still do differ in a variety of terms. The first large scale enterprise in linguistic geography was the preparation of the German Linguistic Atlas. This is where it all started. In the 1880s, the initiator of this great undertaking, Mr. George Wenker, composed 40 test sentences that illustrated most of the important ways in which dialects differed and sent them to all the schoolmasters and teachers to over 40,000 places in the German Empire. This was the first attempt of procuring data for the study of dialects. Though they received all the data, the sentences were to be translated into the local dialect. The publication of the results was not began until 1926. Remember, it started in the 1880s, but the publication of the results was not begun until 1926. The main cause of the delay was the enormous quantity of material that has to be arranged and analyzed. So, the arranged and analyzed version of all the dialects and the pictorial or the easier version that I could mention is the Dialect Atlas. Similarly, a famous French linguist, Jules Guillerand, also during the 1920s, used a questionnaire about 2,000 words and phrases of Guillerand, and he surveyed at least 639 points in the French speaking area. Normally, dialects are of the same language and considered to be mutually intelligible. The word mutually intelligible refers to the understanding of the dialect or the language. For example, the language Kannada. So Kannada can be understood throughout Karnataka. But there are differences and different in dialects and the language spoken. The person from North Karnataka, that is Gulbarga or Bellary or such regions, speak Kannada, which is usually spoken in their rural area, which has influences of Hindi or Urdu from Maharashtra or Andhra and other places. They have a different vocabulary and a different meaning for a different set of words. So the way of talking, the word pronunciation, there are a lot of changes than compared to the southern Karnataka and the northern Karnataka. For an example, if a person from Mangalore speaks the same Kannada but in a different dialect, his influences of Tamil or Tulu, Byari or Malayalam affects differently on the base language, the root language that is Kannada, but there is a mutual understanding between these two people because the root language is Kannada. The core elements are same. Only the vocabulary, few words and few pronunciations are different. So, the common understanding between these two people, even though they aren't speaking the same dialect, is called mutual intelligibility, which is mutual understanding in simple terms. So, the distinction between dialects and the related languages is easier to make because of the existence of standard languages. For example, the major languages in India, that is Kannada, Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, Hindi, also English. Another important axis of differentiation is that of social strata, class. The higher class, the elite class, the lower class, working class, all the other different kinds of class. Even though they belong to the same area, they speak the same language, they belong in a same particular geographical area, their social class, their social strata does make a difference in their language, the way they pronounce, and majorly their behavior. We also oftenly come across this particular example that we speak, that the elite class or the upper class speak a posh language, a more not decent but a filtered language compared to the lower class. The lower class people or the slum area that we refer to, they might be speaking the same thing which might sound rude. So, studies have proved that even social classes and social strata in the society does make changes in dialects, how people speak, focusing on dialectology. And how even the simplest changes in the language can influence the study of dialects and dialectology. Moving on to dialectology. Dialectology is the study of dialects. The discipline of dialectology began in the 19th century with the development in Western Europe of dictionaries, grammars, and regional dialects. There are different types of variations, and the major purpose of dialectology to be existing is the construction of linguistic atlases showing patterns of distributions of series of varying features within a language. Such work on the geographic patterns of linguistic variation is also known as linguistic geography. And now to the major topic of this presentation, Dialect Atlas. This word was coined somewhere around the 1920s. It is the compiled investigations and large number of data on geographical map, a questionnaire that provides uniform data. So there are two basic methods of data collection: fieldwork and survey by correspondence. Fieldwork is practical, in which a trained investigator or a researcher transcribes dialectal forms directly on tape or records or even notes down the precise data and enables a questionnaire to include a greater number of diverse questions, but it implies a necessary limited number of points to be covered. On the other hand, the correspondence method lies in its ability to encompass more points at less cost and with less time expended in gathering the data. Such questionnaires today's Google Forms. So here we have the map of Karnataka showing us what kind of Kannada is spoken throughout the state. Here if we can focus, every district has their own elements or has their own accents to be added, their own features to be added in the language of Kannada. So Bidar, Kalaburgi, Ballari, any district has their own touch or their own style of speaking Kannada. But majorly here, if we could explore, the districts like Bidar, Kalaburgi, Vijaypura, Bagalkot, Belgavi, these districts are highly influenced by Hindi and Marathi because they lie on the borders of Maharashtra, and there are instances because it is closely related to the land of Maharashtra, there are high influences of that language. And the other side of the Karnataka is the Yadgir, Raichur, Ballari, Chitradurga, Chikballapur, and of course Kolar have high influence of Telugu from Andhra and Telangana. And places like Uttar Kannada, Udupi, Dakshin Kannada, they majorly speak Tulu, which is an entirely different language, but also is said that it has come from the language of Kannada. The origin is the language of Kannada. And also the Dakshin Kannada, the Kodagu, Kasargod, and all these places have a high influence of Malayalam in the Kannada that they speak. And Coming down south, the districts like Mysuru, Ramnagara, and majorly Bangalore has a very high influence of Tamil because it lies closer to Tamil Nadu, and the people that have the people that have migrated from places which are closer to Tamil Nadu. And after all these surveys that the researchers went and got through, there is no form that they could present all the data in. The best way to present all the data in was linguistic atlas, that is pictures, to be honest. The most effective and thorough as well as the most expensive way of presenting data in linguistic atlases is by printing the actual response to questionnaire items right on the maps. The phenomena of linguistic geography, however, are usually represented by geometric symbols or figures at the proper points on map, or even more summarily by the drawing of the isoglosses. Isoglosses are the linguistic boundaries, which are just lines that denote how the dialects are being spoken in that language, and it just gives a boundary to the particular dialect in the area, in the maps, or by shading or coloring the areas of particular features. Here, the color hues, the color coding, symbols, and all these things play an important role when it comes to dialect or linguistic mapping. Now we look into how this data is being procured and what are the other types. Only dialect atlases can furnish the complexity, and when it comes to languages, the inventory of linguistic phenomena is so rich, however, that no questionnaire can encompass it all. Language is really vast, and even till date, the dictionary is being updated every day with new words. People, the Gen Z, the Gen X, and all these people are coming up with new words, and this has to be updated from time to time. And there is no one questionnaire that can put all the answers to an end. Moreover, the use of a questionnaire unavoidably brings about a schematization of answers that is lacking in spontaneity. For these reasons, other kinds of publications such as dialect dictionaries or monographs based on extensive free conversation with speakers of local dialects are indispensable with complements to linguistic atlases. Let's dive deep into the methodology behind dialect mapping. What is dialect mapping? The methodology of generative grammar was first applied into dialectology in the 1960s, when the use of statistical means to measure the similarity or difference between dialects also became increasingly common. The major example given here is the US state, which is New York. A whole scale of speech variation can be found to correlate with the social status and the educational level of speakers. And the common example that we can take right now is the city of Bangalore, and how the language has changed, how the social media has influenced the change in dialects and languages, including the language English. English, being such a standard language throughout the world, is spoken entirely different in India. But between all these, the most important development of the time, however, was the rapid growth of methods for investigating these social variations of dialects. In addition to all the other differences, that is the geographical differences, the social strata, and etc., age groups exhibit different patterns. But such patterns of variation differ from one social stratum to another. These dialectal traits can also be changed throughout the time. For example, when we have an immigrant friend who's from another place, whose native language is a different language, we tend to catch up the common words that they use during the daily conversations and use it in our conversations when we are speaking. Dialectologists also study this variation patterns. Another name for dialect maps or dialect atlas is linguistic atlas, a book of maps which shows the distribution of language features over a chosen area. The maps show with a conventional signs such as dots, circles, triangles, location of features used by native speakers such as sounds, words, or syntactic features. Ideally, the speakers are directly interviewed in their home communities and the responses immediately noted but the data are sometimes gathered by postal inquiry also. Here are a few examples for the surveys made and the linguistic atlases procured by this. The first one would be an introduction to a survey of Scottish dialects by Angus McIntosh in 1952. The other one would be by Harold Orton, Stuart Sanderson, and Joel Widdowson, the Linguistic Atlas of England in the year 1978. Looking on to the types of procuring data for dialect maps, there are different ways. Here basically there are two types: the non-lexicographic collection of language. These data in the first type is collected by the Schmeller theory, whose work fits within the first definition atlas. It does make the collection of data directly by the rural speakers, the native speakers, questionnaires, surveys, notes, recordings, etc. The other way around for dialect mapping is the collection of thematic maps, which shows the regional distribution of language. These maps already exist, which is the older maps. We take them for reference and procure data from it and also update the existing maps. What holds for both definitions is firstly that mapping techniques are linked to traditions in cartographic visualization. What is cartographic visualization? Cartographic visualization leverages mapping techniques to convey data containing spatial information such as locations, routes, trajectories on the surface of Earth, basically a map, and all the other elements that we study and add in the map is also called as cartography, which is cartographic visualization. Secondly, the adaptation or the inclusion of textual elements that we find use of techniques that transcend the illustration as such. At the same time, it is also obvious that linguistic atlases are from the outset explicitly bound to concrete phenomena of spoken language, that is, words via maps or texts. We're just putting words and all the other data into a map form, which is easier. Each with its own advantages and disadvantages, here are some of the most common methods of collecting data for dialect mapping. Let's learn how they collect data to make a map. The first, fieldwork, sociolinguistic interviews, participant observation, and word games. Sociolinguistic interviews is the most common method, which is interviewing the social groups or the particular people and noting down the specific linguistic features that they speak when they are speaking, which is pronunciation, vocabulary, and grammar. Participant observation. We observe and record how language is used in everyday life, the colloquial language, within a specific community or a particular person. The last one is word games, which is the easier version to procure the data. Word games and questionnaires can be used to gather data on specific vocabulary items and pronunciation, and it can be useful when we prepare a questionnaire where we specifically want data on one topic or which we are focusing on. It is more easier. These methods can be particularly effective with children or speakers who are hesitant to participate in interviews. The other method is archival research, historical documents, and linguistic atlases. Historical documents and recordings, these things are already existent. We refer all these documents and recordings to study how dialects have changed over time and also hold a comparative study. This research can provide valuable insights into the historical development of languages and dialects, and also to study the synchronic and diachronic approaches of dialectology. Linguistic atlases. Linguistic atlases are a collection of maps that show the geographical distribution of different dialectic features. These resources can be used to compare dialects across different regions and time periods, where we basically use another dialect map to create another dialect map. Other methods also include online data collection, crowdsourcing, social media, and online forums. With the contemporary world with easier access to internet and everybody on our phones, crowdsourcing platforms, and speakers across wide geographical area, and all these things are very easy. Social media and online forums are the most easiest ways to practice the linguistic features and to procure data from the younger generations and specific communities. Moving on further, let's focus on the key uses of Dialect Atlas. Dialect atlases are incredibly valuable tools for understanding and analyzing language variation. Few of them to mention is mapping the distribution of linguistic features. That is, dialect atlases allow researchers to visually represent the geographic distribution of various features such as pronunciation, vocabulary, grammar, morphology, etc. Mapping is just a visualization of whatever the data that we collect. Understanding language change. One of the major use of Dialect Atlas is it's an easier way to understand how language has changed through all these years. By comparing data from different time periods, researchers can track how languages evolve and change over time. This helps us understand how dialects are formed, spread, and how they disappear. The other way is investigating historical migration and contact. Dialect atlases can shed light on historical migration patterns and contact between different language communities, which can also be helpful in actual mapping of geographical areas. The other use is testing linguistic hypotheses. For researchers, they can use Dialect Atlas as a test to refine existing linguistic hypotheses about language variation and change for their studies and researches. The other major use, which is currently being used right now, education. Teaching about language variation and dialects and Dialect Atlas can be used to teach students about the diversity of language and the various factors that contribute to this. This can help students develop a broader understanding of language and appreciate its complexity, and also to learn in depth in whatever concept they take when it comes to languages. Dialect maps also enhances language awareness. By exploring features of their own and other dialects, students can develop a deeper awareness of how language works and how it varies across different communities, different geographical spaces. It does evoke an excitement when we study about other dialects, other languages, and to know all of this, it makes us easier to understand, it makes us easier to travel, it makes us easier to make friends. It has variety of uses. It does also promote language tolerance and appreciation. Dialect atlases can help students understand that dialect differences are simply natural variations of language and it is important, and they do not reflect on the intelligence or abilities of the speaker or even class for that matter. Other minor uses of dialect maps are dictionary creation, where they create dictionaries using Dialect Atlas, which are comprehensive dictionaries that include regional variations in pronunciation, vocabulary, and usage. And speak recognition, that is language modeling, understanding the dialect variation and to improve the accuracy of speech recognition systems and language models, which also benefits the AI and the phone applications that we use these days, the automatic transcription, machine translation, etc. The major use is cultural preservation. Since the existence of Dialect Atlas is available in our hands, we can preserve, record the culture that has been there throughout all these years. We can document endangered dialects by providing a record of their unique features and usage before it is all forgotten. This is one thing that I found really interesting about dialect mapping, the algorithms used for dialect mapping. There are various algorithms used for dialect mapping, each with its own strengths and weaknesses. First, what is an algorithm? It is a process or a set of rules to be followed in calculations or other problem solving operations, especially it deals with computers. An example that I can give is when we are cooking a recipe which contains specific instructions, ingredients for preparing a dish or a meal, and we write it down. Instead of writing it down, there are certain codes that give us these instructions for preparing a dish or a meal, and all these things is done by a computer, and this is what algorithm deals with. When it comes to dialects and dialectology, the first one is the Levenstein distance. In information theory, that is, when it comes to the IT sector or linguistics or computer science, the Levenstein distance is a string metric for measuring the difference between two sequences. Informally, the Levenstein distance between two words is the minimum number of single character edits required to change one word into the other. Making it simple, it is a simple code that reads the words when we take a questionnaire or record data, and it studies the number of edits that are done, that is, the insertions or deletions or substitutions needed to transform one dialect string into another. It's simple and computationally efficient but doesn't capture the complexity of linguistic relationships. The second one is a neural network model. A neural network is a method in artificial intelligence that teaches computers to process data in a way that is inspired by human brain. It's a type of machine learning process, it's also called as deep learning, that uses interconnected nodes or neurons in a layered structure that resembles human brain. It's also known as long short term memory, LSTM. These autoencoders, that the layers that I spoke about, which also works like a human brain, have shown promising results in dialect mapping. These models can learn complex relationships between linguistic features and map dialects based on these learned representations. They are more powerful than Levenstein distance but require larger data sets and more computational resources. The third one that we will be focusing on is support vector machines, SVM. It is a type of supervised learning algorithm used in machine learning to solve classification and regression tasks. They are particularly good at solving binary classification problems, which require classifying the elements of data set into two groups. This machinery or this type of machine learning mainly focuses on classifying things into two groups. When it comes to dialects, it can handle various linguistic features and achieve high accuracy, and particularly with large data sets. They can easily distinguish between different dialects, even which humans feel difficult to do. However, they may require feature engineering and can be sensitive to parameter selection. By the name hierarchical clustering, we can easily procure that it's an algorithm that groups similar objects into groups called clusters. It can classify, it can divide, and make groups with whatever data it has. The endpoint is a set of clusters where each cluster is distinct from another cluster, and the objects within each cluster are broadly similar to each other. When it comes to dialects, this method involves grouping dialects based on their similarities or differences or any other aspects that we ask to. It starts by comparing individual dialects and progressively merges similar ones until a desired hierarchy is formed. This approach is useful for visualizing dialect relationships but can be sensitive to choose distance metric or clustering algorithm. Mistakes do happen when it comes to machines. The other one is multidimensional scaling, that is MDS. It is used to determine whether two or more perceptual dimensions underlie the perceived similarities between stimuli. Earlier, we do mention the color space as the example, as two-dimensional presentation. It's just a color giving idea or color giving algorithm. When it comes to linguistics and dialects, this technique projects high dimensional data into low dimensional space, preserving distances between data points as much as possible. The choice of algorithm for dialect mapping depends on various factors like size, type of data set, desired level of accuracy, specific research questions, etc. A multidimensional scaling, multidimensional. It works between 2D or 3D space. The 3D version of maps, which has mountains and all the plateaus and etc. The MDS works with all these kind of algorithms and these kind of mapping systems. Combining different methods can lead to more robust and insightful results. So these are the major algorithms that we use to procure data and to easily present dialect maps. And here we come to my favorite part of The presentation. Why do we need dialect map? Why dialect maps exist in the first place? Dialect maps are actually valuable tools for studying and understanding language variation across geographical areas. This is the basic definition that we've been listening from the beginning. The several key benefits of why dialect maps exist and why they are really useful is it's easier to visualize language variation. We are literally visualizing the use of language in colors and all the other symbols. Dialect maps provide a powerful visual representation of how language changes across space. This allows us to see patterns and trends that might not be evident from textual data alone, which is the boring PPT or document or research papers, which is only words. For example, a dialect map might reveal a clear dividing line between two dialects, or it might show a gradual transition from one dialect to another. The color hues, for example. Understanding language change. By comparing these dialect maps from different time periods, we can gain valuable insights into how languages evolve over time. This helps us to understand the factors that contribute to language change and how to predict how languages might change in the future and how to protect our own language. Investigating historical migration and contact. Dialect maps can be used to trace the history of migration and contact between different language communities. By comparing this distribution of linguistic features across different regions, we can identify areas where languages have mixed and influenced with each other. As I mentioned, how the Karnataka border touches with Maharashtra, Andhra, Telangana, Tamil Nadu, Kerala. All the influences can be very easily studied through the dialect maps. Testing linguistic hypothesis. Dialect maps can be used to test and refine existing linguistic hypotheses. This can help us to develop more comprehensive understanding in how languages work and how to improve our ability to learn new languages to predict language behavior and language psychology. And these are the same uses that I gave, which is promoting language tolerance and appreciation, identifying endangered dialects. This is one of the major use why dialect maps came into existence. We have an easier way to identify how many languages are going endangered. Dialect maps can be used to identify dialects that are at risk of disappearing. This information can be used to develop conservation programs and to ensure that these valuable linguistic resources are not lost. The only things that we can hold on to is tablets and temples in places where the olden languages are etched in it. But dialect maps in these contemporary world are very useful to locate the endangered languages, to find the endangered languages even before they are extinct, and to preserve them for our future. By understanding the different ways that people speak, these systems can be made more robust and inclusive and exciting. The other uses are enhancing language awareness, providing additional information for dictionaries, contributing to cultural preservation. By recording and analyzing the speech of different communities, we do gain deeper understanding, which also contributes to cultural preservation. In short, my conclusion would be that dialect maps are a very valuable tools for a variety of purposes. They can be used to study language variation, understand language change, investigate historical migration, and contact culture, linguistic, language, people, and many other more. Since the Gen Z people use languages like Riz for charisma and Delulu for delusion, all the trending languages have been changing and English is totally toppled up. Not to mention our regional languages. And during these crucial times where social media spreads like wildfire and it's easier to have all the data in our hands, dialect maps are a very useful tool to study how languages have been changing throughout all these years, and to also predict how language might change in the future and how it has already changed into emojis and short forms. and this is a never ending concept to study and to learn. Thank you.